Morning, Marita, and thank you for welcoming us back. So grateful, and thank you all for being here for the discussion today, for our conversation. Um, I do want to begin with some sad news for the poetry world, especially. Which is that probably most of you have know already if you've seen the front page of the New York Times today that Louise Glick has died. And this was a pretty great shock. Um, um, she was very ill, but had not been diagnosed until about a month ago. And I believe she was still undergoing tests, and then and died yesterday. I was almost thinking about changing the poem to read one of her poems, and then I thought she probably wouldn't like that, and that the poem we are going to talk about today seems an appropriate poem in this new sad context. So oh, there are even more of you than I can see on one screen. And again, thank you for participating. Um, uh, Let me start by reading the poem. To autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow, sound asleep, excuse me, or on a half-reaped furrow, sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. This was the last of the great, so-called great odes that Keats wrote in that year, 1822. It was in the fall of the year. The other three, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, and the Ode on Melancholy, were written in the spring. And I want to kind of start out by talking about the form of this poem before we get into, you know, what it means and how beautiful it is, and all the other really crucial things. But in the spring, when Keats was working on the other famous odes, he was looking for a stanza form, and clearly he didn't want. He wanted something substantial, so not just a quatrain, not just 4 lines or even 6 lines. And he came up with a 10-line stanza that was a combination of the first 4 lines of a Shakespeare sonnet. And so those are the alternating rhymes, A, B, A, B. And instead of a whole sonnet, which would be maybe a kind of clunky stanza form for a poem in multiple stanzas, he attached to the first 4 lines of the Shakespeare sonnet the last 6 lines of the Petrarchan sonnet, of the Italian sonnet. B, A, so it would be A, B, A, B, and then B, C, E, B, C, E. And it was a wonderful solution to having a stanza that was really both substantial, but not too long, not too heavy, and that referred to all this whole tradition of sonnet writing. And Keats wrote sonnets too, and he wrote Shakespearean sonnets, and he wrote Petrarchan sonnets. So he was familiar with the form. And in the fall, when he's writing this poem, maybe, I know at least one of you has noticed, and I know more than one of you has noticed, that this poem has more than 10 lines. And how many lines does it have?
11.
11 lines, which is really a very odd number of lines, a very unusual number of lines for a stanza in a poem. And I have a feeling that when we discussed this poem at the very beginning, when we were meeting in person, that I probably asked the same trick question. So Bill and Denise and Delia may remember the trick question, which is the 11th line? Because I think it's not line 11. the extra line, the additional line in this ode, which Keats didn't call an ode, which is the additional line? And I think it's kind of profound aspect of this poem, which is one of the reasons I wanted to begin with this little formal discussion before we look at the text itself. I know some of you have some thoughts.
Well, Lloyd, you're doing something tricky and we don't know what it is.
Okay.
It's number 5, is it? I think.
No. Why 5?
Well, I hadn't actually spotted the mixing of two different kinds of sonnet, but if you see the first the first 4 as a quatrain starting one kind of sonnet, and I think you then said we get the sestet of another kind of sonnet. Isn't the 5th line the one which stands between those two arrangements, or have I got it wrong?
Well, in this, I would say not in this poem.
Okay.
Mary?
I am half asleep this morning because it's very early here.
Very early.
But
Yes.
so excuse that. I think it's the 10th line.
Why do you think so?
Well, partly because of the rhyme scheme.
Which is?
Well, just looking at this first one,
Yeah.
we have the trees, core shells, more bees. Oh no.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Oh, okay.
I would
well,
agree with you.
now the half sleepiness is kicking in. I'm not sure why, but we have a double rhyme in lines 9 and 10. And
Right.
then I think there's something kind of poignant about the 10th lines. They seem to be the more final of the two in at least the first 2 stanzas, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think in all 3 that
Yeah.
so
Lloyd, I was going to say,
Mike.
yeah, technically it looks like number 8 is the added line. If you're thinking he originally wrote it A, B, A, B, C, D, E, C, D, E, the intruded line is number 8.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Mhm.
8. No, I agree with Mary on this.
Okay.
And I think for the partly for the reason that Mary expresses, because the stanza form here is A B A B, as it was in the earlier odes, and then C D E C D D E. So it's that extra.
Actually, DCCE,
Yeah.
because it's more, it's A, B, A, B, then C, D, and E, shells.
Yeah.
Rhymes with cells.
Yeah, but that's because cease is in the way.
That's because what?
Cease is in the way.
Well, all right.
It's the added line.
I think the extra line is the 11th line, but
No, I think it's the 10th.
No.
No, cease doesn't rhyme with anything.
Yeah,
yes, it does. It rhymes with bees.
bees. And
Not really. Trees, trees and bees are supposed to. Cease is usually not seize, but cease.
Yeah,
It's-
but Brooke,
it's just off.
Brooke
But
and
it's-
Look certainly rhyme. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Well, I will make my case for the 11th line as the extra line, but I'll wait till this discussion is finished.
Okay. I'm surprised to hear you say that. But I would agree with Mary that there's this this extra rhyme. The extra rhyme is the third to the last line and the next to the last line. And then the final rhyme is we would come to expect after in relation to the earlier Keats odes. And there isn't a rhymed couplet in the last 6 lines of the earlier odes. So he wanted to make some change. And to me, the biggest change is adding that extra rhyme right before the end. And I think I would argue, and I humbly argue with Steve, because Steve,
This can be a both and. It doesn't have to be an either or.
right. Well, let's think about that. But to have that that rhyme coming just before the end really seems to me one of the things that this poem is about. That something extra is happening before the end. And that the whole poem is about something happening before everything comes to an end.
Can I just?
I'm sorry, who? Oh, when?
Well, I'd
Yeah.
like to make the both and case when.
Oh, okay. Stephen, go ahead.
When I read it, I hear his experiments in Shakespearean sonnets, and I hear the closure that is created by the rhymed couplet, and my ear makes meaning out of the closure of the couplet: bees cease, brook look, croft, soft croft, and I hear the next line as the appendix to the closure, both orally and imagistically, with the o'er brimmed and the last oozings. These are not mutually exclusive ways of listening to the poem, you know.
Right. Oh, no. But I don't disagree with you about that. I'm really, my question really has to do with the major change that Keats made between his 3 earlier odes and this final ode.
Right.
The major change is adding the rhyme couplet, or adding the rhyme to create a couplet before the last line. And that in the earlier odes, the last line would have been just part of this,
right?
A, B, A, B, C, D, E, C, D, E. And here it's A, B, A, B, C, D, E, C, D, D, E. And that's the formal thing that
Right.
Keats is doing differently. And to me, that's the technical thing in this poem that raises the issue of he perfected this new form in his 3 earlier masterpieces. Why did he change it? And why did he add this? Suddenly he has these poems that are with 10-line stanzas. Why does he have an 11-line stanza, which I don't know of another poem in English that has an 11-line stanza. And I think the reason is a profound one. That he is doing something really profound by making that change. Anyway, we can go back to this, and certainly as we go along in our conversation, I know it's been mostly me having the conversation.
No, but also, Lloyd, it makes sense because if you omit the 10th line, the stanzas still make sense. But so that would be a sort of litmus test for it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah. So I think it is the 10th line. Yeah.
I think it's both.
Okay. Sure. Well, of course it changes things.
It makes it even more complex than I was aware of before, with how the rhyme pattern interplays with all the different aspects.
Right. And there are other technical things that I hope you and I know I will kind of point out as we really get into the poem. But let's talk about the words. Now, what's your let me tell you a little. No. I'll wait. I have a little story about this poem, but let's look at the whole picture for a moment, and tell me what do you think of this poem, and what's going on? What do you think is going on in this poem? It's a poem that some people think may be the greatest single short poem written in the English language, or the most beautiful. What gets to you about this poem? Tom, I want to ask you, because I know you were eager to join this conversation.
Okay. Well, verbs. The verbs in this poem are incredible. And the movement of the poem is incredible. I mean, we got this incredibly intricate stanza form with all these rhymes, but it just moves along so smoothly that unless you study it, you're not even conscious of the formal elements that you're dealing with. Yeah. But verbs, I mean, season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, maturing, conspiring, run, bend, fill, swell, plump, budding. You see, it's just alive with verbs, one or two verbs in every line, and yet the first stanza is all one sentence. So he's managed to cram more verbs or verb forms into a sentence than it seems possible. And yet it all is smooth and it's colloquial. And you never feel like I'm dealing with this complicated sentence that I can't parse. So somehow and that's part of what creates this kind of miracle of sort of gentle, smooth, reflective quality. And yet you're constantly dealing with a field of action.
But I would say some of those verbs, especially the monosyllabic verbs, have a kind of real energy to them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and also thinking about if I just said the word plump, which part of speech would you expect it to be?
Right.
Adjective.
You think it was an adjective. But Keats makes it all more active by turning an adjective into a verb, into an active verb, into a what do you call it? A verb that has an
transitive, right?
A transitive verb. Thank you. It's been a while.
it would have to be phrasal, wouldn't it? Plump up exists. When I was thinking about the verbs before this meeting, I actually went to the etymological dictionary, and plump up, as in plumping up a cushion, apparently enters the language in the 1530s. So it had been knocking around for a while, but he truncates the phrasal verb. But all the time he's using verbs in an unorthodox way. I mean, we would think of swell as an intransitive verb, but here it's used transitively. And later drowse, someone can doze or drowse intransitively, but here the personified figure is drowsed with the fume of poppies. It too becomes transitive. And it makes the whole thing more transactional, doesn't it? It's not as if objects act, they are rather interacting.
Right.
It's
Right,
to your
exactly.
point about the
Catherine.
it's the same as he's doing in the form, as you pointed out, he's swelling the form by adding that 11th line. And all of these, I was also struck by the verbs there, verbs of abundance, and that the apple is bending the and maybe because of bosom, they're verbs almost of pregnancy. And bosom reminded me also, it's how you feel when you're nursing, when your breasts are too long. It's swelling.
Before we go too much further, Denise has had her hand up for a little bit.
Sorry.
I'm
not used to the electronic hand, so forgive me.
No worries.
Denise, please. Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh no.
You're not on mute, but we can't hear you. Oh, you said you were worried about your connection.
Yeah.
Turn up the sound.
She's
type it into the chat.
She could type it into the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, she's a long ways away.
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, but we can't. Oh,
darn it. Okay, my apologies. Hopefully, maybe that'll change, but I know she was worried about the connection. I'm sorry, so keep going.
Catherine?
If looking at this poem, if one were not an expert and kind of just looking at it, you'd think it was over heavy with adjectives. You just go, everything has an adjective. It's a mellow fruit, a bosom friend, a maturing son. And one would have, one's English teacher in the 10th grade would have said, try and be more direct. Don't add so many adjectives. And of course, some of them turn out to be verbs. Some of them turn out to be adjectives, but there are a lot of them. There are a lot of picture words added.
Right. But Catherine D, I want to go back to the thing that you were saying about pregnancy. And do you see that idea, that image reflected in anything else in the poem, in the first stanza or even elsewhere in the poem? What about the second line?
Oops, hold on. My apologies.
Was that the library?
No, there was someone I just didn't.
The adjectives are fabulous too. This is Denise. The adjectives are fabulous too. Many have verbs mixed in. Whoops, just disappeared. Many have verbs mixed in. So do many of the nouns. Yeah.
And while we're talking about word forms, can anyone diagram this sentence? I don't know what the subject or the predicate are. You know, it's sort of like there's so much going on sentence wise that if we just tried to find the subject and the main verb, I can't do it. So
I don't
maybe
think there is a main verb.
I don't think there is either.
I think it's all built on layering of phrases, but there is no independent clause.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't the whole of the first stanza one long vocative, so that we don't get to
Yes.
the main clause
Yeah.
until we
Yeah, exactly.
Which would make sense for an ode, which is an address to usually or originally to a deity.
I guess if you were going to find a sentence, a complete sentence in all of this, it would be most of the last line. Summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells, but it's subordinate,
Yeah,
because of the four. But I want to go back to the idea of pregnancy and sexuality, because I think there's a lot of sexuality in this poem.
There's a comment from Ted right now to add to what you're saying that pregnancy, fruitfulness, maturing, swell, plump, sweet kernel, which kind of carries on what you were just saying.
Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. Michael, you're on mute. Mike, you're on mute.
If you hit the space bar, you should unmute yourself.
Sorry, I wasn't actually talking, but I will.
I meant Mike Steffen, but Mike Scudder, no, but talk, please.
It's the subject in the first sentence, I would say, is season, who's being addressed for the whole poem. It's a little bit off of the pregnancy question, but what I found so delightful was realizing that we'd gone from the abstract season to a person or a sprite in the second stanza.
Yes.
And then we go back more to the abstract in the third. But there is a sense of her being very alluring, especially in the second stanza.
Yes. And female.
Yes.
And the poem is to autumn. So your comment and the comment about just the poem, the whole first stanza being in the vocative case, being in the speaking to, addressing, hailing even. Bill, is your hand up, or
no, sorry, I was just listening to you.
Are you just smoking?
Yes, just smoking, sorry.
Okay. Bill Bennett, yeah.
The whole first stanza seems to be more or less in opposition to thee in the first line of the second stanza.
Yes.
It's thee who's being addressed.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's all we are in a kind of state of suspension, but all of these things are happening. Thatch Eaves pulls in the verb thatch. Cider press has press. Yeah. Yeah.
Stephen,
yeah.
I'm gonna raise my hand. Yeah. If you're Keats and you hear the word sun, you might well think of Apollo. There's the sun is clearly male. Conspiring can mean to unite together to produce something. So I think there's a lot of sex.
Well, I think conspiring is a really key word.
Yeah.
And what does it mean literally?
To breathe into each other, right?
To breathe together. Yeah, to breathe into each other.
But it comes from, at least my OED, and is that it did at one time mean to unite in producing something.
Right.
So,
Literally.
all that swelling and fruit are the offspring.
Absolutely.
And then when they over or brim at the end, it's almost as if there's really no other verb. It's I keep seeing the surface tension in a glass of water with the or brim. Somebody's poured so much in there that it finally overflows.
Right. More,
Yeah.
later flowers for the bees.
And this isn't even autumn. This is it's a season of mist, but this is late summer.
This is late. Right. Right.
The bees are wrong, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I find the next line, until they think warm days will never cease. When we're young, we're not aware that we're young. It's only as we get older that we feel time's winged chariot.
Right.
So they think that the bees are deceived to think that warm days will never cease, because warm days will cease.
And that's really one of the keys to the whole poem.
Yeah.
That there is in this what seems to be so sexual that you think, yes, now, yeah, that you think it's not going to end. Hume, did you have?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was
Okay.
just nothing.
Okay. But it's a deception. And you're kind of overwhelmed by all of this stuff happening with no, with no conventional subject and verb, but there's all this highly sexual stuff going on. Fill all fruit, swell the gourd. I mean, it's really, it's just short of being graphic. And then it's a deception. The bees think it's not going to come to an end. You think it's not going to come to an end. And then he doesn't say it comes to an end. He just says it's a deception. No, he doesn't say it comes to an end in the first stanza. For summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. It's so physical, and maybe sexual there too.
It's almost as if its duration is in some ways deceptive.
Right.
It is not deceptive in that it really is there, but you are deceiving yourself if you think it's going to last forever.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And Ellen and Jim, did you have something?
Yes. Oh, great.
I just wanted to continue this. I mean, the title of the poem is To Autumn. So by very definition, it implies the end, or that, the swelling will cease, and that the autumn clearly brings on the winter and the end. I mean, it's all the action, and then it's undercut, I think.
Right. Yeah. And that's sort of the setup in this first stanza. All this stuff is happening, but it leads you to think that it's never going to end. Right. And then the second stanza is really, I think Michael Scudder, you're exactly right about suddenly autumn becomes embodied in this female figure, who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store. So it's an abundance. Mike, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is an evocation of the allegories of autumn painted in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Peter Bruegel notably has one, but there were many. The four seasons that we know well from Vivaldi came from four allegorical tableaus of the four seasons.
Right.
And autumn has always been an especial of the four seasons that Pierre de Ronsard, the French poet, wrote about in the Renaissance. The Ode to Autumn endures today as a major subject of study in French studies. So I just wanted to just point out it is a well-known motif.
Right.
And I think he's offering it in sequence to that sort of physical, immediate anxiety age comes to in realizing that we're losing. That as we come to autumns of our day or autumns of a particular season in our life or a year in our life, that the salvation of it all is somewhat in memory, in the perspective of it all, gaining a perspective that the young people don't have. It's the tit for tat. You gain insight, sadder but wiser, and the insight comes. He has this trope of art history that he can sort of, share with. Now this is how it goes, and I think that's part of evoking that historical tradition of art.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, please.
Thank you. Are both the figures used to personify autumn feminine in the second stanza? I mean, I can see that the gleaner would be typically, especially in 19th century French paintings, it's a woman with a basket on her head.
Yes.
But I've always thought of the farmer lying down in the granary, tired out after his exertions, as a male figure. Is it the hair lifted by the winnowing wind which makes you think of a female figure?
I think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, if you assume it's a female figure in the first stanza who conspired with the sun, who is definitely male, then I think carrying that identity over into the second stanza is in keeping with the poem's logic.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sure that's why I just assume that it's consistently this one female.
No, you're probably right. I just associate sort of farmers with their sides as male figures performing the harvest, and then the female gleaners entering the fields afterwards to pick up the scraps. But
I had always thought of it as a male figure in the second stanza, but I like it better as a female figure. I think it works. So I'm persuaded.
Okay, good.
I love that they never the persona, whether it's the same one or whether I like Michael, you use the notion of different sort of visual panels. Tableau, I think is the word you use. She doesn't seem to do any work. She's always in between doing work.
Well, she's taking some time off now.
Yes, right.
And that's also part of this whole central idea in the poem of something going on that you think isn't going to come to an end because it's in a state of suspension, of temporary suspension,
stationing.
Yeah. So this is
she's drowned. She's drowned by the fume of the poppies,
Yeah.
which is a little opiate.
Right.
Like.
You also get an image of death. With while thy hook spares the next sway than all its twined flowers.
Yeah.
The hook of
But
death.
if she spares it,
It's
though.
an image, yeah, and she becomes, she as the harvester becomes an image of death. But she's not, but she's taking a nap.
I wonder,
she's kind of drugged. Denise, look at.
Oh, yes, her comment. She's describing autumn in England. I know, I'm trying to.
Their harvest time is weighted with pre-Christian beliefs and practices. The cycle of fertility underlies this sensibility. Yeah, you know, exactly. And here is this, we're in another state of suspension. I mean, there's so much activity going on in the first stanza, and then the conclusion is that that's a deception. The bees think it's never going to end just as we do, but it wait a minute. And then in the second stanza, the drowsiness of the figure, careless, the wind is lifting her hair. I think something very interesting happens rhythmically in the second stanza, and that the poem is so far has been mostly in iambic pentameter, da 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 da. But in the second stanza, there are a lot of lines in this stanza that actually begin not da-da, but da-da, that it's the accent is on the first syllable and on the first word of the line. I don't think it's who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store.
No.
I think it's who hath not seen thee. And then sometimes, not sometimes, but sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting on a granary floor. So thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. Well, that's primarily iambic. Or on a half reed, that's primarily iambic, but then drowsed with the fume of poppies, not drowsed with the fume of poppies, but drowsed with the fume of poppies. So something is happening rhythmically in this stanza that's sort of changing the movement of the way the lines move.
Yeah. May I suggest something, Lloyd?
Please.
I think we're getting more spondaic. In other words,
also,
there are a lot of beats where you could either take it as two strong beats or as very close to two strong beats. Who hath, you know, arguably that's pretty close to a spondy, or the sitting. I tend to take the, you know, sit has got to be a strong beat, but also, the is also a strong beat.
Right.
And so it's kind of slowing down the pace and putting a lot of kind of weight, much more than in the previous one. And that might go with the kind of sense of uncompleted or interrupted action.
Right. But Jim and Susan just wrote a very, I think, a very important point about how much enjambment there is, how much movement there is from the end of a line to the beginning of the next line. The lines don't come to a full stop. Whoever seeks abroad may find thee, not whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting on a, but it moves into the next line. And I actually think one of my favorite examples of that rhythmic playfulness, even, I mean, I agree that there's a weightiness, but there's also a kind of playfulness.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's funny, Lloyd, I'm so glad you said that, because what's behind the corner? There you are. I mean, the prop, and then the one keep steady is poignant because of the unsteadiness of it.
I love that. And I mean, in my mind,
Sorry to interrupt, but you struck a chord for me when you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I have to say, in my mind, steady coming where it does in the line and coming with an accented syllable on the first syllable, that it's almost Keats saying to Autumn, steady.
Yeah.
Because it's like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across the brook. So it's a very unsteady. I think this is just what you were saying.
Yeah.
It's a very unsteady moment because she's trying to walk across a stream with a basket.
I mean, that's exactly what the enjambment is, a branch between one thing and another.
Yeah.
It is the most beautiful example of Keatsian stationing, I think, in all his work. It's up there. Let's say it's up there.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a wonderful sort of moment. Certainly, it's a great moment in this poem, and that what's happening rhythmically is also extremely important.
The unsteadiness, the fragility of the calm that's inside, which I forget who mentioned the spondees, but I mean, it's still iambic pentameter, but it has so many variations that it is, it's as noticeable with its substitutions as with its regularity. It's so modern.
Yeah. Oh, Michael. Yeah. Michael.
Sorry, I get very enthusiastic about this one.
Okay.
Which Michael this time?
Michael Scudder.
The theme of deception and death, I'm thinking that the poem moves from late summer to early winter, but I'm noticing that all the seasons get mentioned except for winter. There's this deception of, like you've talked before, is it ever going to end? And we're sort of avoiding the actual full dying and mourning and winter by having it just out of sight.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's right. And winter is lurking behind this poem, behind this whole poem, but it's really never mentioned.
I actually think, though, winter is more present than spring is, even though spring is mentioned. But that's a whole other thing we can get to.
Okay, good. And again, if we look at the end of the second stanza, sometimes like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look, thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. I don't think we've talked a whole lot yet about the sounds in this poem. The oral sense, the summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells, all that alliteration. The last oozings, hours by hours, and the S in oozings and the S in hours really sounds like the Z in oozings, hours by hours. It's just, and then again, here is this patient look about something that is coming to an end, but it's not ending yet. It's still oozing, it's still dropping, it's still
tasty.
Hey, yes.
Still what?
Absolutely.
So tasty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You want every last drip of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me realize something I hadn't noticed. For one thing, both the first two stanzas end with a kind of liquid, gooey
yes
richness.
Right. Yeah.
Summer hath o'erbrimmed their clammy cells, and
yeah.
What was just suggested, they're both sweet. Cider,
yeah,
honey, and we're about to lose this sweetness is the implication.
Yes.
In both cases, it's
Yeah.
almost over, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you call ours a disyllabic word or a monosyllabic word?
Thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. I think it's monosyllabic for Keats.
Yeah. One of the things that's I feel like I need to train my ear better to hear in the years that I have left is duration, because those are single syllable words, but they take longer to say than a word like watch or picked or and that's part of what creates that elongated rhythm there. It's not stress or unstress, it's the duration of the syllable.
Right.
And that's, for me, I have to really work on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a diphthong?
Yeah.
And I bet those are always, those very often create a longer duration of a single syllable word.
So if you're singing it,
Thank you. It's actually a good way to look out for it.
Bill Symes.
Yes, sorry.
How do you pronounce HOURS?
Well, I would have answered as you did, that it's monosyllabic, but I partly because, if the line is to be decasyllabic, we have to regard it as such. But I'd almost turn it into a disyllable. It's hours, so it's so it hovers indeterminately between monosyllabic and disyllabic. I mean, sometimes people talk about stopped words and unstopped words, don't they? Whether there's a syllable to stop the word and hours lingers on. So Stephen's point about duration seems relevant. I mean, but hours by hours is an odd phrase, isn't it? I don't know exactly about 19th century usage, but hour by hour would be a more common modern idiom, wouldn't it? So that the pluralization, which then picks up on the alliteration with the z sound in oozings, is created by a slight deviation from a natural locution.
I mean, that I hadn't thought about that before, but then hours, it's really hours by hours is longer than hour by hour.
Yes.
And so this oozing, this oozing is really taking a very long time.
And a lot of patience.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It also rhymes with a two-syllable word in flowers.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it has to rhyme with flowers, yeah.
But I mean, then Mary, hours by hours is another way of slowing down the progression to winter. Yes, exactly. And Mary, what were you going to say?
Oh, just auditorily, I mean, it picks up the sense of OURS, hours, and it kind of dovetails with the sort of procreative stuff happening. I don't know, that's how it struck me actually when you were reading it, because I wasn't looking at the line at that point and I heard hours. Anyway.
I kind of apologize to Bill for asking him, because part of my sense of the difference between hours and ours is the difference between British and American English. And that it seems to me, I've heard, at least in movies, I've heard British actors say flowers, or I'm not doing it right, but or ours as a monosyllable. And that Americans, the diphthong is always more pronounced. We always say ours and flowers. And so it seems to me there's almost a kind of cliche of British pronunciation especially among actors, British actors in films, where the diphthong is shortened rather than lengthened the way it is. I mean,
if we do see it as verging on the disyllabic, then it participates in a widespread process of elongation and protraction and prolongation.
Right.
I mean, that vocative, which goes on and on, you just sets the tone for the whole poem. Practically everything thereafter goes on longer than you expect it to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The beginning of the third Marvel uses flowers monosyllabically, sometimes abbreviates as flowers. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, that could be the printer doing that, but yeah. But it might be him. Where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Well, where does this come from? Who is thinking about spring? Where does this is just, seems to me, it's just a total intrusion
of Shelley.
That I hadn't thought of.
Well, somebody used the word cycle, and I think this is an answer to that impulse to want to think, oh, spring will come. This poem's smarter than that, less sentimental than that.
But I think it's Keats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that he's written the great poem about spring, or one of the great poems about spring, the Ode to a Nightingale, which is also song. Where are the songs of spring? So it seems to me this intrusion is really, it's been in the back of his mind for this whole poem so far. Wait a minute. We're talking about summer, and summer coming to an end. Flowers is closer to fleur, in a Brit evoking French as classier. Yeah. Here he is. He's really worried about time. He's really all of this stuff about time seeming to come to a halt. That sense of deception has really been in the back of his mind for the whole poem. Where are the songs of spring? That's what he's worried about. Full-grown lambs are sheep. Yeah, let's get to those lambs in a second. Where are the songs of spring? Where are they? And that it's so poignant, it seems to me. It's so much his feeling just bursting through his own anxiety, his own fear. Where are they? I mean, he's what, 25 years old, 24 years old when he writes this poem. Why is he so worried? I mean, he's going to die very young, but he doesn't know that yet.
He doesn't?
No.
He did.
I thought he did.
Not yet.
May I say something?
Please, Nick, yes.
I think this question we're talking about, where are the songs of spring? He isn't asking a question. This is nostalgic. He is thinking back on the springs he has known before. Not that he's looking forward to a spring. And that is emphasized, I think, by a soft dying day. And touch the stubble plains. Stubble is dead stalks. So then the wailful choir, the small gnats born among the river sallows, born aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. Yes, and we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We're going to be born aloft by the fickle winds, is what this meant to me.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you completely. And that this whole stanza is really much more explicitly about what has been lost and what we're losing. That this moment, this endless moment, this endless summer is really coming to an end. And then it's emphasized by the looking back to even before the poem began, back to the spring. Well, that's even further gone. Where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them. Well, we haven't been thinking of them, but he's been thinking of them. Just under the surface. Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. And that I find that heartbreaking. I mean, he's not putting his heart on his sleeve, but he's really thinking deeply about endings, about things coming to an end. And this is the music. It's not the nightingale that is capturing his imagination in May of this year, but this is a different music, and it's the music of things, as Nick really I think so accurately pointed out. It's the music of things coming to an end. Barred clouds bloom. That's another very interesting transitive verb. And it's very interesting that in the original version of the original draft of this poem, the phrase was, "A gold cloud gilds the soft dying day." And that's so much less interesting. It's such a cliche almost. And then turning bloom into a verb is one of the most radical changes from noun to verb, or intransitive to transitive verb. It's such a kind of shocking change. Barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Well, it's beautiful, but it's all, the harvest is over. As Nick said, the stubble plain, the stubble. And in a wailful choir, well, suddenly we're getting something, it's beautiful, but it's mournful, it's elegiac. In a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn. I mean, all of this language is the language of endings, of dying. The small gnats mourn among the river sallows. Sallows are willows. Among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking. And I love that line ending, that suspension at the end of the line, borne aloft or sinking, as the light wind lives or dies. Well, that's the question. Oh yeah, the bees. I can never read the the chat comments fast enough. But yeah, now the bees have turned into these birds, the gnats, birds. Full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly bourne. Well, I don't know if they're sheep, but what's going to happen to them?
Well, they'll be slaughtered.
Well, they may be shorn.
Yeah.
You don't think they're heading for lamb chops?
We all are, but these particular lambs may be shorn.
They may be shorn. Yeah.
And one way to read.
When you have your hand up, Wendell.
Well, I think Keats is dead within 2 years of writing this.
Yes.
He dies in February of 21, and this is written in the fall of 19.
Right.
So he's aware.
No, he's not yet.
Oh,
he's not yet. He knows when he has contracted the
well, there's that famous coughing up blood.
Yes,
where he says,
and that's after this.
That happens later, yeah.
Yes, but my experience with folks is to say that he may not be conscious. That's not this. He may not be conscious of his tuberculosis, but he is aware of his mortality in a way that.
Well,
that's part of the. I think that's going on. These are the plump hazelnuts of his of that's part of his awareness of this production.
Well, his younger brother has already died of TB.
Right.
Yes.
And he, Keats worked in a hospital and in a kind of poor part of London. So he was aware of young people dying.
But psychically he's aware. There's that's my sense of working with people in his situation.
Yeah.
And I think our knowledge of his of this being in his last 18 months is one of the things that makes the poem so moving for me.
Yeah.
Is that,
right.
you know, that's there.
But I would just say, I mean, he was so totally aware of what was going to happen to him when it started to happen. And I think here it's a more universal sense of things coming to an end, of things dying, and certainly of people dying. They don't die in this poem. There are people dying. There are young people dying in the Ode to a Nightingale, which is from, 6 or 8 months earlier. And he's very explicit about that. But he's explicit about it because he's referring to his brother. But here, it's a more universal sense of everything coming to an end. It's very, and I would say, Shakespearean.
Yes.
I think, we talked about the, Shakespeare sonnet 73, that time of year thou mayest in me behold. And Keats knows that poem, and he knows Shakespeare. He certainly knows Shakespeare's sonnets inside and out. And I think there's no question that he would be aware of sonnets 73, not necessarily that he was copying it in this poem, but the poem about autumn and the autumn of one's life is very clear in this poem. And
I also think it's movingly impersonal. This poem.
Right.
To me, it's the poem that it's one of the poems that helps me live my life.
Yeah.
Because I think whatever he may have known about his own personal mortality, he had lots of sore throats. He was no dummy. He knew what those might mean, but he was still making plans.
Right.
But this poem doesn't imagine the full cycle. That's why I think winter is there. It has mentioned spring in order to say, no, there's a different music we're going to listen to, and it's the music of mortality. And it sticks with it. And I can take this through my life and feel less afraid of death. I'm sorry. I'll go that far.
Okay. I would go with you. Yeah. I just want to, Cami Thomas couldn't be here today, but she sent me a note that I wanted to quote to you. She says, I love how the season deepens with each stanza, and how the small gnats rise and fall on the wind as we do. And I love how shivery and gently ominous the gathering swallows are. I think that's very eloquent. And and now hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from the garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. It's so they're leaving, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're going south.
They're going south.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very notable, Lloyd, as much as we get of the visual in the second strophe, the third strophe is just sound. It's all audition, and it's wonderfully described audition at that.
Yeah.
And the first stanza is full of tactile imagery.
Taste.
Taste, and also, swelling is actually, what's the word? Haptic? I can't remember. Tactile. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, the chorus takes over in the end.
It's all music.
It's all music. Yeah.
Every sense is appealed to in this poem, all five. I had my students identify it. The hard one was fumed, or fumes, like their smell.
Right.
And then sweet.
Catherine?
He moves us over the course of these stanzas from being in the first stanza like the bees that think warm days will never cease. And the imagery of that stanza being so seductive and so, as I said, pregnant and sexy, as you pointed out, to that last stanza where the gathering swallows I picture are gathering at evening when the light is about to go out.
Yeah. And then again, there's that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that the first stanza is like, that is no country for old men, the young in his arms, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great reference. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that ending, that extra line, the couplet before the end, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. But that couplet, the couplet coming before the end, which is the real innovation of this poem. And I don't know any other poem in English that does this, but that has this kind of suspension, and that once you get to the third stanza, you feel that even more strongly than you felt it earlier in the poem. He doesn't have to explain it anymore. I mean, he's the cider press, the cider that keeps dripping, or the honey that keeps flowing. And now he doesn't have to say that. He doesn't have to be explicit about that suspension, but it happens to you emotionally. It happens to you physically, that you get to this couplet, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from the garden croft, in that state of suspension. And then, swallows swarm at twilight. It's an almost explicit image, right? So that the image is carrying you. You already know what it means. And now you're sort of feeling it. It's in your it's in your body, what this suspension is doing. And then and gathering swallows twitter in the skies, powerfully understated last line, but so final that it's really heartbreaking.
I think this poem is enlightened. I think this is one of those poems that actually comes from the center of a witness place that transcends transience. I know I think it's a Zen poem.
I love that.
I'm with you.
And there's no there's no adieu. It's the only ode that doesn't say goodbye. It doesn't have to say goodbye.
Right. And that, again, that where are the songs of spring? Where are they? That's the most explicitly personal moment in the poem, and then it just goes, it disappears.
Also,
it's the only abstract line in the poem too.
There's the line that follows it is a line of great philosophical acceptance. Think not of them, thou hast thy music too.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that line, in a way, if there's like a topic sentence of the poem, it's that second line. Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. And that's what the whole poem demonstrates.
Yeah.
And if that is the moment when personal feeling intrudes, it's actually cast in a very traditional form. This is a version of the Ubi Sunt, isn't it?
Right.
A bit like Où sont les neiges d'antan or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the only I is I. A-Y.
Yes.
That's right. Good. Good. Well, wonderful discussion. And Marita, thank you. We know you have to get back to work, and thank you everyone for coming. Next month we have a special guest. Martha Collins is coming, and Martha will be reading one of her poems. I'll send that to Marita, and Marita will send the poem to all of you. And I'm very much looking forward to Martha joining us.
That should be the Saturday before the Saturday after you and Martha read at the library. Lloyd.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Because you and Martha are reading on the 13th in the Davis Square branch of the Somerville Library.
And that's a Monday evening, right?
Yep, Monday evening the 13th.
Still figuring out what to read, but
Louise book.
I'm really excited about reading with Martha and with Charles Hartman.
Yeah, we'll have more promos coming out. A lot of promos.
Mike has organized that, so
Great.
Thank you. And really thank you all. Again, here's a poem that I sort of know in my bones, and you've all given me new things to think about, and I'm so grateful for that, and for just being able to talk about a great poem like this.
Thank you. And thank you for your question about the 11th line.
Oh, well, it was a serious question.
The kingdom.
It's a kind of joke, but it is a serious question, because there's no other poem that does this, and it does it with such intent. It's not just an experiment that I think I'm going to try to add a couplet before the last stanza. There's a real meaning to that form, and I think it's a great lesson for students of poetry, that form isn't just kind of frivolous decoration to a poem. It really means something. And you got Keats, and Keats means something.
Sure does.
Thank you, everyone. Maria.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.